pleasure to have here Professor Petrelli from the, well,
in between.
In between. She is a professor at the Sheffield University, but also moving to Italy at the Politecnico of Milano, a very important, famous university in Italy, and she will be in the design department, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm keeping a foot in Sheffield. So she will be traveling between.
Interesting commuting.
Yeah.
Between two countries.
So she is very much interested in a novel form of interaction, especially also tangible interaction. As you see, there's a lot of stuff there that we can try afterwards. And she has been working for a long time, in particular in the cultural heritage. And so we'll talk about museum today. She's doing also other work that maybe if you're interested, and you can ask her on, yeah, what's the last project in archive? No.
The decolonization of video archives in Europe, and another one on deceiving face recognition software.
That's also very interesting. Yeah, she has received many awards, both from industry and university. So thank you for coming, and yes,
thank you for being here. It was I had a debate with myself what I should present to you, and in the end I decided to come with all my little gadgets, because it's always nice to have something to try and hold. And as you can see, the talk is about tech in museums, but very likely not the way you imagine it. Oops. You might imagine the most standard situation is that is an app on your mobile phone with information that you access while you are in the museum. But my research is very much like the statue of Venus here, that wants to bring back the attention of the visitors onto the heritage instead of the device. I would like to start from the end, in a certain sense. So this is a framework that reflecting on 10 years of research, I came out with the idea, what do we need to design technology, unusual technology, embedded technology, tangible technology for museums. The first point for me was to be able to go beyond the information. Yes, information is important, but people go to museums for the most different reasons and not necessarily to learn. Maybe to relax, maybe to spend an afternoon with friends and family. And in this way, so the tendency is very often to have the digital created as a separate thing with respect to the exhibition, to the museum. While instead, for me, they should be designed together, specifically for that space. So it should be bespoke. I'm going to show to you, for example, of all our bespoke designs for different places. And so providing different experiences, even if they use exactly the same technology. And the process to arrive to that, I'm afraid I don't have time to go into the process of how we designed it, but it's very much iterative and explorative, starting in one direction, abandoning everything midway through and going in another direction. So this is, say, the framework I would like to discuss with you. And I will use 4 different examples for that. And what is important, so yes, there are the different components that would be looked after by different people, but the very important fact is that there is also a museum context that affects the design and whatever you're going to do, the intervention to be. I'm going to play a clip from an installation that we did with Museon, that is a museum in the Netherlands. It's about the Atlantic Wall. That was a defensive structure that the Nazi built all over the coast of Europe, from France to Norway, to defend themselves against the possible attack from the Allies. So I play a little snippet. You will have to be very quiet because we couldn't have the audio working. So I will have the sound from my...
Welcome to the museum. Welcome to the Atlantic Wall exhibition. The exhibition The Hague and the Atlantic Wall explores the impact of the Atlantic Wall structure on the city of The Hague during the war and what it meant for civilians and all people living here. And it also explores what it meant for the identity of the city after the war. At the beginning of the exhibition, you could choose from what perspective you want to visit the exhibition. And that's where the mesh technology comes in.
So the object I chose was this one, which was lots of Dutch civilians talking about their experience during the war. And it was great because actually you hear all these personal stories, and I think you get far more than you would do just going around and reading it. And it was really helpful as well because you've got the voice in your ear, but also you can see different things on the screen, and the two go together. So you kind of build up, not an audio-visual picture of what was happening at the time. So I found it really easy to use. It's good.
The perspective you choose makes your visit very different. And you could say your mesh replica is a tool with which you dive into the stream of history with all kinds of different perspectives, incidents, different opinions, and also different experiences.
So I hope you managed to understand a little bit what was happening from the bottom, the back of the room. Oops. The key point, if you've seen it, the interaction was with physical objects. So I pass some here and there so that you can have a look of the material that were used. So there were six replicas distinguished by topic and of the perspective, as the curator was saying, and the language. And you've seen in the video that visitors would pick up an object and then arrive to these positions where you could see an interactive points like that. So in this station, there is a fragment of a V2 missile on in the case, while instead this is the model of the international zone, where now there is the International Court of Justice, for example. That was the place where the Nazis were testing the missiles. And this is an example of the content. So the content comes from the archive. I'm playing a little bit.
Some people no longer believe a word the German authorities say. If they say the V1 will be followed by a V2 and perhaps even a V3, they think it's a pure con. And if they say what's happening is a race between the Anglo-American...
I'm stopping it there, but you have a sense of the type of content. This is a piece of German propaganda declaimed by an actor. And the opposite, so this is the German perspective, while the Dutch civilian, of course, you can see from the image, is a completely different story. It's about how the firing of the missiles were not
25th of January 1945, 8:14 a.m. A dreadful impact judders through my whole body. Simultaneously, a brilliant red flash lights up the pale early morning sky, and for a moment, I have the appalling thought that this may be the end. Sam van Vloten wrote this in his diary after a German V2 rocket launch failed. No longer believe a word the German authorities say.
Okay, we go on. But you have a sense of the two very different perspectives that are accessible exactly in the same point, but show different conflicting narratives. And this is part of the design of the content. So the content should be interesting and challenging at the same time. It should be short. We had some videos that were long, 14, 15 minutes, and very, very few visitors actually listened to all of that to the end. And as I already mentioned, should be challenging, shouldn't be didactic, shouldn't tell you what to think, but put you in the position of questioning yourself. And this is the way we design the content. Designing the objects that we interact with is again, very relevant. And in this case, I wanted to try with an app because, yes, I was doing things with digital objects, but everyone was asking me, why? Why do you go through the trouble to make physical, tangible objects when you could have an app on a mobile phone? So I was fed up with this question and I set up a comparative study. So I compared the replica that are going around together with an app on a mobile phone that was really following exactly the same steps. So you would have at the beginning, you would choose one of the perspective, then you would go to the different place and play in the content that was relevant for that. However, the replicas, they have two functions. One is the tangibility, so the controlling the media through the object. But the other is the aesthetic. So what I did was to introduce a third element, so a card, to control the media, but without the aesthetic of the replica. And then I asked the participants, to the visitors actually, what they like the best and why, and what they dislike and why. I was also observing their behavior. I wanted to see if the phone or the replica would trigger different type of behavior in them. And I had a very huge number of participants, 76 you see there, but a wide range of ages. So I was able also to test this idea of younger generation being more attracted to technology or not. They were visiting during normal hours, so as normal visitors. If you want the details, there's the paper that reports everything, and just really summarizing the most important, that is the 56% of people didn't like the phone. And the reason for not liking the phone is that they couldn't look and they felt the phone was getting in the way of their appreciation of the exhibition. On the other side, the replica was the most preferred with 45%. And there was also a preference for 15% about the cards because it was very easy to put in your pocket. So if we put the two things together, we have 60% of preference for the tangible versus the mobile phone. And then I looked at what people, if there was a difference between young and old. And actually, there isn't a difference. It's not true that I didn't find any statistical evidence that the younger generation would prefer technology while the older one would not like it. Quite to the contrary, a woman in their 70s, she said she really disliked the replica because she made her feel like a little girl playing with a whole dollhouse. So, what instead was the difference was the way visitors consumed the exhibition. So here you can say a young man was really interested in the topic, attentive and absorbed by the description, able to switch their attention from the description to what was in the case. While here we have a gentleman with white hair who preferred the phone. As you can see, he is listening to whatever is there, but his attention is not on the phone. He's looking around what's making a sense, so having an overview of a kind of running commentary of the exhibition. So if we talk in terms, going back to the framework, if we talk about the product design, what is needed to do must be very, very easy to do. With the phone, it was an Android, and people who had an iPhone were really in trouble because we use different different way of touching the screen. While in this case, you just put in there and take it away. So easy of use was the first element, appealing. The replicas are nice objects. They are replica of objects that were in display. So that is a factor. But the most important of everything was to be surprising, seeing something different, experiencing something different. We have the phone with us all the time. So when we go for leisure in a museum of a heritage place, we want to have something different. And that was the case. I move quickly to the interaction design. I'm already consuming too much time. And I want to tell you what is inside. So inside is the NFC tag, an NFC reader. And this allowed us to record everything that replica was doing. So we were able, in the end, to know precisely where this person is gone. So one of you, well, in one of the pack, there is one of these postcards. The postcard has this unique number that allows you to enter a website. And in the website, you will have all the information that was available in the museum. So you can go and listen to, for example, what you didn't listen before, and allow the people to upload their own personal memories. Like in this case, a man in the 80s that uploaded a photograph of himself while he was playing in the field that were before occupied by the German. Another thing that we tried was to use the logs to personalize content from the archive to as a kind of portal in this case. So the postcard was a way to bridge the physical exhibition with the online exhibition. And so one important thing is to offer choices. Technology being invisible, that was very, very important because people then immerse themselves in what they were seeing. And this bridge between online and on-site. The last component is, to the visiting experience. We were able to get it through the logs. So we had roughly 15,000 people who used the replicas over the 4-6 months of the opening of the exhibition. And what was this was roughly 40% of the visitors. The curator said it was a very, very high percentage. You know, we would expect everyone to go there, but instead, very often is 10-20% of visitors that use the technology, if that's available. What instead was extremely interesting was that half the people use a German perspective. So the effort to create new content paid off in this case because people were interested in that. For me, very important was to see this drop at the very end. And this is the printing of the postcard. Only 10% of the visitors actually ended up printing the postcard. And the reason for that is because of the layout of the exhibition. We didn't have any input in that one. And you see the starting point. So you pick up your replica there, but then the printing is on the other side. So what we observe is that after their visit, people were returning the replica where they had it instead of the printing. You can see there it's quite flat. There is nothing to attract your attention. And so people missed it. So this is an example in which the museum context negatively affected the visiting experience. So to show to you instead the other way around, when we started with, we wanted to exploit the setting, the museum. I go in the Italian Alps. Well, now they are in the Italian Alps. At that time, they were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And here there is a fort that's called Fort Pozzacchio. This is how it looks like today. It's really a piece of engineering because it's dug completely into the mountain. And you can see here there are these round points, is where the observation points from inside. It's all galleries and caverns. The exhibition was not in the fort, but was in the gallery, the artillery gallery that is under the museum. It is again a tunnel dug into the mountain. It was a bomb shelter of the Second World War, so really matched very well with what was in the mountains. The curators, of course, we always work in collaboration, co-creation with the curators of the museum, and they wanted to bring different voices. So there was, of course, the voices of the soldiers that fought and lived into the fort for Pozzacchio. But there was the voice of the engineer that was telling this idea of digging everything inside instead of building the fort on top of the mountain. There was the voices of the people who built it, the people from the village, and not only the men, but also women and children were involved in the building. And they wanted to capture the situation before the war, when the village was really happy to have work for everyone, and the first road to arrive to the village. But then during the war, of course, all of them became refugees when their houses were destroyed. And then after the war, the fort became a source of metal and wood, source of material. So I play you a snippet again to give you a sense of what this is. So at the entrance, the visitors would receive a pebble that represents the fort, a piece of rock. There are 4 installations. Here in the video, I have only 2, the beginning and the last one. And here is very kind of intentionally emotional, is the diaries of the 2 armies involved in the same battle. So there is the Italian soldier, there is the Austro-Hungarian soldier, and there is the chaplain that talks about finding all the bodies and the blood in the morning. Getting out, the visitor returns the pebble to the entrance and receives a postcard. In this case, it's based on narrative, automatically generated depending on what you have seen. So with the stamp of the day of the visit. Here you have the elements. You see they are exactly the same, technologically speaking, exactly the same element as the example before, NFC tag, reader, and a printer, but organized in completely different way. You don't choose a perspective. You will have all the different elements, all the different tweets, all the stories as a timeline, organized as a timeline on a different bench. The content would be bespoke for the place. In this case, it's a white animation coming out from a black hole. So you see these things appearing like the memory from the past. And in the case of the last interactive point, you have these people, these actors, actually talking to you, turning and talking directly to you in a corner that is very secluded. So it was a kind of like a confession. And this is the very end of the tunnel. So you've been walking for half an hour, it's cold, it's dark, and was really emotionally strong and affecting the visitors. So we evaluated, we had 120 visitors, we collected questionnaires and interviews, and the comments were very, very strong. In terms of the content, for example, this idea that the stories made them look at the artillery in a completely different way, thinking of the suffering, and the content of the museum was enriched by the content presented by the digital intervention. We also wanted to probe about the pebble because, you know, the way it is on a bench, there isn't any difference between a rack of buttons that you can go and press or your pebble that you pose it. Instead, everyone was talking about my visit or entering into the story or having an agency because you had this pebble. So there was something going on there. And then the interaction with the postcard, receiving something is out of finishing your visit, something that was yours, representing what you have done, was considered a nice gift, but also a connection between who had put the effort to set up the exhibition, creating the content for me as a visitor, and myself. This type of results was striking for me because there was a language, an emotional language I didn't expect. So I was trying to find an explanation. I looked into psychology. And then I found that the touch is the only sense that is interactive. We touch and we are touching in return. And it's something that gives us a sense of the world as well, of us inside the world. With objects, we sense the environment, and they become, if we keep them with us long enough, an extension of the self. And those of you who have tried it, you will see that it's just a piece of plastic, but it's a piece of plastic designed by a very skilled colleague of mine, a product designer, and it's not a ball. So you end up playing with that. It's done with a special type of resins that keep the heat after you have hold in your hand. So you put it down, you're in this very cold place, you scoop it back and you can still feel the heat with this coming through. So the sense of touch is definitely something very strong, and I don't think we have explored the power of touch enough when we talk about interaction design. And then I had a question. fine with touch. You know, I've done a lot of things with touch, but what about embodiment? So I jumped to another project and tried to explore the effect of VR as embodied. Here we are in Rome, is the Trajan Market, is a museum with fragments and remains of ancient Rome, particularly the Forum of Augustus that you see there was a huge building with you know, a temple in the middle, and there was also tribunals. And this is what is inside the tribunals. I pass these two around. It's a bit warm, hopefully that's gone. You can look around and see. Hopefully I put the sound lower enough so that it doesn't start to speak. But if you look around, you can see, you can explore the space. The idea was to use this one. And after, if you want to stay and try it on, it makes a difference between having, you know, using the phone or using this piece. Because actually my initial study was to compare these against a tablet, exactly with the same content, but I wanted to see if there was a difference. And actually the difference is that with the VR, you are teleported in the past, in something that doesn't happen if you have the tablet. Having said that, if you are interested in look at the paper, it was also, I had a very different museum as well, so it's an interesting comparative study. What is interesting in this case is that it was activated by e-beacons. So I put 4 e-beacons in the 4 corners of the room. So when the phone goes around, at a certain point, the scene should change, because the interaction is very simple in a sense. So you don't have to do anything. You just move, entering a room. There is a beacon. The content is changed automatically. Here below is there are the 5 areas around you, the cube map around you, and you are in front of the fragments of the Colossus of Augustus. That was a statue of 30 meters high statue. And when you look at with this one, you really have a sense of how tall this was, while you don't have the same with your mobile phone. The other thing is the top. So you will see there are spotlights. Where the spotlights are, there is some content. So by just looking at the spotlight, that automatically starts the audio. So again, the interaction is extremely simple and very effective. So the embodiment is not just the fact that you are there, you feel there physically, but you have the sense of a different place. I forgot something incredibly important to say at this point. That the inspiration for this work is an aspect of game design. It's called environmental narrative. It's while you are, as a gamer, in a place that is empty. There are no people, there's no one talking to you. You go around and find objects, and by interacting with the objects, you are trying to understand what happened in that place before you arrived. So we use actually the same techniques. Here, for example, you can see there are 2 objects on the table. They are connected to 2 different things. And these are where the spotlight is, so that when you look around, this starts the narrative. So sorry, skipping through, I should have looked at my notes. So I was saying, it's not only the feeling of being in a place when you have a good reconstruction of the building, but also the feeling of being in a different society. So there, you've seen there are objects like a chair, a table. There was a wax tablet. In that case, it was the tribunal. So there was the calling. How would people be called to the tribunal for the trial? So through this mechanism of having everyday objects pass here and there and stories connected to that, there was this sense of being a lived space. And think like the Colossus. I really suggest you to come and try it, because you really feel small with respect to this enormous statue. And this is exactly what Augustus wanted you to feel. So if we go back to the framework, so it's not only valid for tangible interaction, it's also valid for other forms of technology in museum, thought in a different way. So the content is, yes, the 3D reconstruction, but also the use of everyday objects. Very often you don't have these everyday objects and narrative of everyday life in those spaces. And the fragment of stories, again, those stories bring the place alive. The product is the visor and the beacons. I already mentioned if you have the phone or a tablet, even if the content is the same one, the experience is completely different. And in terms of the interaction, I said that you don't have to do anything. You just move in a room and then look around and this automatically starts the content. I have to say that this interaction was not the first one that we arrived at. Again, we did some experiment, tried a few things that didn't work, and we arrived at this final design. So for now, I can tell you that both the tangible and the virtual have the embodiment. And one question is that should I choose one or the other one? Maybe something works better, like in this case is an archaeological place. The Romans are very distant from us. And so I take you to the north of England, along Hadrian's Wall. That was the border of the Roman Empire in 122 Christian era, in a very small museum, Chester, and this was a collaboration with English Heritage. The small museum is the collection of John Clayton, who was the person who rediscovered the piece of Hadrian's Wall in his park while he was doing some building work, the draining. And this is his collection. So the museum is an example of Victorian collection done for the pleasure of the owner and to delight the visitors. So we couldn't do anything. And when English Heritage, they came to us and said, well, people enter and they spend really little time in that because they're just overwhelmed. Imagine being there with all these stones, one after the other one. And so they leave without appreciating the collection, but also appreciating that those stones, what we just look at now, for the Romans were embodiment of their religion. So they were interacting with these pieces of stones, with this altar. So we started a co-design and co-creation here. We were acting out some of the prototypes because this was an augmented reality. They really, really wanted it. Here is an interactive excavation book, and then there was another one that you don't see there. But during this process, none of the 3 prototypes we had worked in place. So we just abandoned that and we arrived to something completely different. And I pass it around. This lamp, so you as a visitor, receive this lamp with 3 lights. And this is Juno, the queen of the Roman gods, that gives you the light, and you enter the museum and you offer your lights to the gods. This because the Roman religion was transactional. If you gifted something to the god, you would expect something in return. Coming back to Juno, you place the empty lamp, and she will give an oracle, so tell you about your future. So before I pass this around, a couple of observations. You will see that the light is flickering. And also was the nice accident that because it's conductively charged, is warm. So you have the feeling of holding a flame with that. When you put it in you scan it, you donate it, there is a flash of light, and then this disappears. The postcard, you know the story by now. We record what you've done, so the postcard, is very different depending on what you've chosen. And now I tell you a little bit how this was done. So you have 3 lights, but you have 13 gods inside. So you have to make a decision. You have to choose what is going to be good for your future. And all of these gods have been tagged with different features, say. Some they represent the traditional gods from Rome. Some are the local gods, and some instead come from far away. So not only the Roman religion was transactional, but also every time that the Romans conquered a place, they were including the local divinity into their own pantheon. So in the north of England, you find Cautes that comes from the Middle East, border the Iran. This one instead is from Germany. There are some gods from Spain. So by playing with these, and then you can see here, there are certain Aesculapsus is for health. This again is for health. This is related to the army. There is something like in this case, success, could be success in battles, could be success in business. But by combining the different tags, we were able to calculate what was the most relevant aspect of your choices. And then we printed the postcard. Because there are 13 gods and 3 choices, we ended up with 290 different combinations. So you really had a sense that that was exclusively for you. Again, evaluation. First thing that we looked at is that if this really changed the behavior of people inside the museum. If you remember, when English Heritage came to us, they said, oh, people don't stay. So were people staying longer? They did. Here, by accident, I have only parents and children, but also there were a lot of adult people that were very enjoying it. Or like in this case, the mother going back and taking her own lamp. And there was a lot of conversation, like in this case, the dad suggesting, oh, you want Victory, she's the best. So there was a lot of discussion about the gods, what they would for, and how they can make the best choices. It was not unusual to see the children coming back for a second or third time. They wanted to collect them all. So that was fun. And the lamp seems to really increase and improve the experience of the place. People say, oh, I've never seen anything like that. It was fun, much better than being there to read. The postcard was cool. Also, not very many postcards were left around, so people were taking them away as a souvenir. What we didn't expect was a comment of this kind with a person of faith that felt uneasy with the idea that they had to gift something to the god or something against their own religious practice. And in a certain sense, for us, was very satisfying, because it means that the little mise-en-scène that we set up, come inside, behave like a Roman gift, was affecting visitors, in particular in this case, in a way that we didn't expect it. So it was effective in immersing people in the Roman culture. Just briefly to conclude, the same, in a sense, you have the same setting, an archaeological museum with very different practice and very different content. In this case, we had the deities that represented the aspects of the religion that we wanted to communicate. Here we had the shrine, Juno, the lamp, the postcard as a product that work all together through the interaction. We forced the visitors to look at what was there. We forced them to choose and to make a decision, then to take away the decision through the postcard. So quickly to think, if you take all of these 4 examples, I had others. If you like, I can show you another 10 different installations. But the point is that you have to design the content, and the content should be there to provoke questions rather than give you explanation, challenge you, asking you to do something different from what you would do normally in a museum. Technology, as you've seen, is always invisible, and these foster embodiment and engagement. This one, the last one, has been there installed in Adrian's Wall since 2017. It's still there working. The technology is incredibly old, but until it breaks, it works perfectly fine. No one is going to tamper. And if you have a tablet, most of the time someone is going there and touch something that all your nice app has disappeared. Well, in this case, the only thing that we found were coins that have been put through the kind of donations through the slit for the printer. And the the product design for me is extremely important because the objects are something that we like to hold, and in a sense, they are a call of action for the visitors. The very, very last slide is about how we do this. So we start from the museum. The museum should be the one that gives you the context. It's all bespoke. Then the different elements are driven by different people. So the heritage has always looked after the content. They are the ones selecting, they are deciding in conversation with us, with the HCI expert for interaction design or the product designer. So we tend to work together on the concept, agree on the concept, and then every one of us works independently on our different elements, and then we bring things together until refining after 2 or 3 times we have the final product. And with this, I conclude. Hopefully, I showed to you that it is possible to bring back the attention from the devices to the heritage. And I'm open to your questions. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. I thought that was really, really interesting, and I loved the creative designs of all the different like artifacts that you've been sharing today. So my question was, yeah, so I noticed that you mentioned a lot of different museums that you worked with, and I was wondering, in terms of the development process for these different kinds of like tangible artifacts, or like VR, like how feasible is it to kind of apply this at scale or like across different sort of types of museums? And did you encounter any challenges when working with like museums from different scales? So like maybe larger ones or like compared to ones which are like smaller and maybe don't have as much resources?
Well, I don't think it's, well, I don't agree that you should scale up things. I really believe that the design should be for the place. And I give you an example. So in these 2 places, these 2 Roman museums are completely different. This is, you can see, the single room, probably half of this space. The Trajan market is 3,000 square meters. So there is no comparison. You cannot scale something of this sort to the Trajan market. Even something of these wouldn't be manageable because it's such a big museum that carrying this with you for 3-4 hours is going to be exhausting. So with the museum, when we tried, we tried this, and then that's part of the importance of the process of trying out your concepts and see how it works, is that it was incredibly effective to transport people in the past, but carrying these wouldn't be feasible. So the idea was we could have a periscope or something hanging from the ceiling in certain places, so you would arrive when there is a reconstruction, and you would find this in place and you would be able to use it. So what you can scale up is the technology. So in 3 of the examples I gave, the Atlantic Wall, the one with the pebble, and the last one with the lamp, the technology is exactly the same. So you can scale up from the technical point of view. And what we did, that it's not here. I don't know if I have the images. Yes, I do have the images. Give me a second. So what we did, because of the because of the importance of the design. So it is the design that changes that creates the experience. So what we did was we made a toolkit, both in terms of the hardware and a software, a portal. So you would be able to upload your content and download it straight away into objects. So the creativity should stay there. You should create for the place. You should consider what is important for that place. And then you can reuse the technology. You have tools that makes very easy for you to create other stuff. Indeed, we had in the end a workshop with 40 heritage professionals in 3 different countries, and we asked them to make things from scratch. And in a day and a half, with the technology that was simplified, the reuse, they were able to create their own experience, reusing the same type of content. So as an answer, I don't think it makes any sense to scale up the final application. You should scale up the technology so that it can be reused in different places with different examples and so on. Welcome.
One question here.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much. Lots of really interesting explorations of these exhibits. So you mentioned about the importance of personalization and individual agency, and it seems like the focus was very much on the individual, and it seems some of the choices are almost creating a sort of solipsistic, lonely effect with interaction. And I wonder, on the one hand, the extent to which that's a choice when the design, and on the other hand, whether you have explored the extent to which these physical artifacts also mediate the social interactions between the people going to the museum together. You had a quote right at the end, the mum reflecting on her daughter's interaction with it. But yeah, I wonder if that's like a separate component you looked at.
It's a very interesting question, because I missed completely to tell you from the very beginning that instead the social aspects is one of the pillars. One of the things that we observed, for example, with the Pebble, if people were, how they were using it, would they discuss what they wanted to listen together? So it is very social. And in the very first one, when you have the here point, we had a lot of discussion with the museum, because we wanted to have some megaphones so that you could have 2 people listening to the same. But they said, no, this is going to be too noisy, distracting others. But people go around the issue, because for example, there were people visiting together with 2 different replicas and then listening together with the same to the same thing. We had a lot of conversation everywhere. People because they were experiencing together. Is not necessary that the technology forces you to interact. That it gives you topics to discuss later on with your other partners. And for example, it was in the Museum of War, it was not unusual that people would separate. It was a clear pattern of men interested in army, going there and spending times observing the guns, while the women were reading the panels, and then they would meet and use the interaction together. So we tried the intent was to have a kind of social and facilitate the discussion, but not forcing the interaction. And in terms of personalization, I can send you a few papers, because at the beginning, personalization was really part of the project, and I've done work on personalization for my first paper on personalization in museum is 1999, and there was the idea that the system personalized things for you. Sorry, I can tell you later on about that. Yes.
Question, because we have a class.
Oops.
So kind of 2 minutes, and then maybe we can discuss more.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the talk. My question is on the technological side. Are there any recent developments in AR or VR or any near future developments that excite you about their application for museums and heritage?
Yes and no. It depends. Always depends on the way you use it. I was last year. I was in Warsaw, and there was an embodiment of Copernicus, and you would talk to Copernicus, and you would reply. And that was very interesting. It was in a science museum. I've seen some attempt to that, but my impression is that that type of intervention ends up being that you are attracted to that because of the technology. There are a lot of studies from the late 90s, or 82, I think, the first one, where people go and interact because they are curious of the technology, not because of what is there. And this is repeated, tabletop interaction. There is a new gizmo, and you go and try it, but then you don't go in depth to take the content. So yes, there are things, Google Glasses, that was tried, and people just say, well, unless you have interesting content, there's no point. So I go for the simple, but with a strong concept behind it.
Unfortunately, we
Yes.
have a class coming
I go,
in.
I go, I got
I
all
don't
my
know
bits
if-
and pieces everywhere. Is
So
there anything? Yes.
should we